I will start off by saying that I'm here wearing two hats. I'm representing the Car Share Association. I am the vice chair, and I'm also representing Modo. I'll very quickly tell you a little bit about each. The CSA is a global association, we heard from Molly, dedicated to the car sharing industry exclusively. And we do have a mission, common with many of you in this room, to move more people away from private vehicle ownership. We represent organizations from about a dozen countries around the world, including Canada and the US, Italy, Mexico, Germany, South Korea, and more. And we also have key affiliates, so building partnerships with the UITP, some of you may be members there, the Conference Board of Canada, and the Transportation Sustainability Research Center out of UC Berkeley. A little bit about Modo, so there's probably some people in this room that have heard of us and maybe some not. We are Canada's first and only and largest car share operator. We were founded in 1997, about 21 years ago, and we have a social purpose, which is a little different than some of our corporate players in the sector. Our purpose is to transform communities by connecting people with places in a way that is affordable, convenient, inclusive, and sustainable. We have a board member here today. Did I get that right? Good. For those of you that are unfamiliar with our service, we actually offer a station-based or round-trip service, two-way car sharing as opposed to one-way. The situation today, I'm speaking to an audience of the converted, so I don't need to convince you of anything, but I think you've all heard some of these very sobering statistics. They're very true to the Vancouver area and BC, and I'm sure to many of the regions that you represent. New car sales are on the rise. The average household in Greater Vancouver owns 1.6 vehicles. Single occupancy vehicle use is still the norm. Traffic congestion and commute times are on the rise. And while some progress has been made, it's still clear that if we don't change our love affair with the privately owned vehicle, we can expect to see transportation-related issues in our regions get a whole lot worse. In fact, if the rate of car share ownership in Metro Vancouver doesn't change, over the next 20 years, we're going to see another 700,000 vehicles on our streets. Somebody mentioned 28,000 vehicles being removed and what that represented earlier, so you can just imagine what 700,000 of them will look like. In tandem with public transportation, we see a growing number of providers, more and more coming to our region every day. We have one-way and two-way car sharing, of course. We also have what I would call true ride sharing. In our neighborhood, we have something called Pop a Ride, and we have another service called Spare. In both of those cases, and the reason why I want to clarify that I call that ride sharing, is that the driver and the passenger are actually sharing the ride, and they're doing that to share the costs of ride. We also have, and as this whole conference today is about, is ride hailing, soon to come to BC, to Vancouver, possibly peer-to-peer as well. And I think the big question that we're here to learn more about and listen to all the smart people on the stage and the researchers and everybody in this room is to figure out, is that service going to add or detract from public transportation? Because I do represent the car share industry, I am going to take a moment to repeat something that many of you have heard about, some of you may not, but I think it bears repeating, is that one-way and two-way car sharing complement each other. And in different ways, they also complement public transit. They are effectively two different solutions to do different problems. And I think it's really important for the people in this room representing municipalities, transit authorities, and such, that we really take a moment to really understand the differences. One-way offers a really good first and last mile solution when it's used in combination with transit. It allows people to leave their cars at home and to augment trip convenience when their destination isn't particularly well served by transit. But it does risk being used for commuting to and from work instead of walking, cycling, and transit. And we do see this happening here in Vancouver, where we see a lot of Car2Gos and EVOs making their way into downtown Vancouver and other employment areas from the suburbs and from the neighborhoods. Two-way, on the other hand, has been proven to reduce vehicle ownership and total vehicle kilometers traveled, with most of our users walking, cycling, and using transit a whole lot. And while the two-way service is absolutely not designed for commuting, it does allow people to gain access to vehicles during the day when they need them, so they can leave the car at home. It's worth noting that with Vancouver's 2040 goal to have a maximum of 1/3 of trips, all trips, made by car, it's important, I think, for municipalities to focus on policies that support the reduction of vehicle kilometers traveled and accelerate mode shift, as many North American cities have seen one-way car sharing and the ride-hailing, and we heard a lot from researchers today, cannibalizing some of those trips that may have otherwise been made by transit or by foot or by bike. So off my soapbox and some pretty visuals here. Just a very quick visual from a recent UBC study where you can see the relative impact of one-way car sharing and two-way car sharing in our region. Lots of blue, a little less red. And here you can see from a US study the impact that ride-hailing appears to be having on public transportation, suggesting, as we've heard again from some of the speakers earlier, that there's definitely some cannibalization taking place. So what will it take to move towards a brighter, less congested future? Sorry, I need to see my time. Oh, good. We believe more collaboration with municipalities and transit authorities. We've already seen some really encouraging work done across the country. I'll go through a few examples here in Canada. There's lots of cool stuff happening abroad, but we're doing a few things right here too, so I'll showcase them. And I also wanted to really point out that a progressive proposal by the City of Vancouver to, it's just a proposal, and it'll hopefully go through in July, to require all new developments in downtown Vancouver to have a TDM plan while reducing or even eliminating the minimum parking requirements. Here's a great example out of Quebec, a collaboration where Communato has partnered with public transit in Montreal, Quebec City, Sherbrooke, and Gatineau to include multiple modes of transportation, including via rail, taxis, car rentals, and Bixi, which is their bike share. And everything is all on the Quebec Transit Opus card. And that integrates payment, and it also integrates access. And another example here out of Halifax, where CarShare Atlantic and Halifax Transit have come together to offer savings to residents. So when you're using both services, you're saving money, and by doing that, they're also contributing to encouragement of more mode sharing. And a local example, finally here, where Modo collaborated with TransLink to make trip extensions and multimodal use easier. So for those of you familiar with our SkyTrain station from downtown Vancouver, taking it into a station in the suburbs and picking up, for example, a Modo and taking that up to the lake or go for a hike or go for a swim. So making the multimodal use easier by having the two-way car share right in the parking lot of the SkyTrain station. And here's another local example where Modo is currently partnering with TransLink on a pilot, which is a van pool program that's aimed to reach hard-to-serve employment sites. In a nutshell, this program would see specific Modo vehicles behave as carpools during commuting times to and from work, and the rest of the time they would open up and be used as regular public car share vehicles open to all members. The benefits to all stakeholders we think is pretty clear. The employers would see reduced parking demand, something that they're really struggling with, and an increase in employee retention. It's really hard to retain staff that can't get to work. TransLink would see a complementary transit solution for difficult locations and times. And the community benefits by having accelerated car sharing in the area, more vehicles available in more places. The latest word from TransLink is that they have found what looks to be a suitable employer, and we look forward to getting this pilot off the ground soon and learning as much as we can. But of course, there's more to be done, and I'd also like to say as a point of clarification, that creating policies to increase the use of car sharing isn't the objective in and of itself. At least it isn't for us, but rather it's a means to get more people to walk, cycle, and take public transit. And we see good policies as ones that encourage mode shift to increase usage of more forms of transportation. We see the ingredients of good public policies as those that keep the public's interest top of mind. I think we heard a lot from the data panel about public interest and focusing on public interest. We also believe that good public policy would level the playing fields for all mobility providers through consistent requirements, one that distinguishes one-way car sharing from two-way car sharing, most of all to ensure that the value of the TDM incentive provided is actually proportionate to the impact that it actually is intended to have. I would also like to say that, hold us accountable, hold us service providers accountable. If we don't share our data, in our opinion, we shouldn't actually benefit from any of the incentive. And finally, one that uses third-party academics to scientifically measure everything we do. So I was really pleased to see some of the researchers in the earlier panel. So what else can we do? I'm not saying anything new here. We've heard about it. A lot of this is happening in other parts of the world, some slower to happen, certainly locally here. But what else can we do here? We can introduce more programs like MASS that we're seeing in Montreal, making the user interface better by encouraging modes and payments. Integrating modes and payments. I think one of the other panelists had talked earlier about integrated transportation hubs. So hubs where we see transit, where we see bike sharing, car sharing, all in one place to encourage not just mode share, but also mode shift. And we'd also need to see the cities step up a little bit and improve the city's infrastructure for charging. So if we want to see deployment of electric vehicles in car share fleets, we kind of need places to park them and plug them in. So we need to see that speed up. And finally, when the autonomous cars come in, we'll certainly be ready to welcome them into our fleets, because I think there's probably no better place for an autonomous vehicle than in a shared fleet. You don't really need to own one if you can just press a button and off they come. So these types of collaborations, I think, will take us from an incomplete transportation solution where we see some current gaps to a brighter, more connected future where together we can achieve our goals of transportation demand management, complete streets, and active transportation. So thank you, and a little plug for those of you that like rain. There's another rainy city called Paris, and the Car Share Conference will be taking place in October. And if you're interested, our ED, Pam Cooley, who can wave or stand or something, would be happy to talk to you afterwards. Thank you.